This video is brought to you by my Patreon subscribers. Thank you so much for supporting the show. It's no secret that many Disney villains were queer-coded, but when people talk about them, it's the same story. They talk about Ursula, about Scar, Hades, Jafar, and many others, often from 90s Disney movies. And the queer coding is always about gay men. But not all villains follow that format. Cruella de Vil is one of the most iconic Disney villains. She has a beautiful design and a classic personality that rides the line between charmingly arrogant and dangerous.
Miserable darling as usual, perfectly wretched. I want the job done tonight.
And of course, she has an unforgettable song written by Mel Leven. But when talking about this character, most people leave out something. She's also queer-coded. Cruella seems to fit one of the roles that lesbians and bisexual women had in Hollywood at the time. Eccentric characters who were ultimately predatory. Just like stereotypes about gay men, they were viewed as a threat to society. And when looking at Disney movies, Cruella isn't the only villain that appears to come from that. While drawing Cruella, animator Mark Davis had a few different models in mind, one of them being Tallulah Bankhead. And Bankhead was not only a cultural icon of her time, but she was also bisexual. Well, actually, she slept with men and women, but never used the term bisexual. The closest she got was saying ambisextrous. But her sexuality isn't the only reason I say Cruella is queer-coded. Tallulah Bankhead wasn't only a queer presence in the Hollywood scene, but she was also camp. And anyone can be camp, but it's an expression that has a specifically queer history. In her influential book, Notes on Camp, Susan Sontag describes it as a seriousness that fails. And this particular brand of performance, fashion, and expression can be seen throughout the queer community and its history. And for many people, Bankhead is a key camp figure who had her own distinct charm. She was so recognizably herself that she spawned a new archetype. The lascivious, deep-throated, husky-voiced, hard-drinking, glamorous woman. Her idiosyncratic way of speaking sparked millions of impressions, and any drag queen now who still draws out an extended darling can count themselves in her debt. Doesn't that sound familiar?
How things go here at home?
Oh, frightful, darling.
How are you? Miserable darling as usual, perfectly wretched.
As it turns out, Cruella's coding goes beyond her character design. Actress Betty Lou Gerson said in an interview that she specifically put on a Bankhead-esque voice, making it more than just inspiration, it was imitation. The line between Tallulah Bankhead and Cruella de Vil is thin, and maybe that's why queer people love Cruella so much. She has all of the same campy charm, and for queer people who feel othered by society, sometimes the most empowering thing you can do is root for the fabulous villain. Cruella is mean but ridiculous. She's scatterbrained and selfish. She never stops to think. I don't imagine murdering dogs was ever on her mind. All she saw was the fur coats she wanted to make out of them. Part of what made Bankhead such a unique celebrity at the time was her complete openness with her sexuality. She was not at all shy to say how much she loved men, and of course, she was very candid about saying, "My father warned me about men and boobs, but he never said anything about women and cocaine." And there were many women in her life. Rumored affairs include Billie Holiday, Marlene Dietrich, Hattie McDaniel, among many others. And between her scandals, copious drug use, and sort of diva personality, she didn't care what anyone thought. So she became a unique icon in and out of Hollywood. And then her queerness, her melodramatic camp charm influenced one of the most iconic Disney villains of all time. And then there's the song. There are many wonderful Disney villain songs, but perhaps none are as strong as Cruella de Vil. Not only do I love that it's hard to even say her name without thinking of the melody, but it also has a really unique spot in the film. It's a villain song sung not by the villain herself, but by somebody else about her. Unlike other villain songs, it's not about her wants and wishes. It's a warning before she even enters the movie. And with that information, we know what she's about. We know that no matter how charismatic she may seem, she's the villain. I've talked before on this channel about the queer influence of Disney villains. In a world that's often so hostile towards queer people, being able to act out antagonism in often unrealistic, fantastical scenarios can be liberating and cathartic. Queer people loving and rooting for Cruella don't want to harm puppies. Maybe they just want to see a charismatic, rude, but fashionable woman in conflict with society. And as we saw in Cruella last year, maybe there's a reason she's the way that she is. Like many Disney villain stories in the last decade, there's a tragic backstory added to make her motives more relatable. But for many people, the real Cruella de Vil will stay in 1961, with the classic Mark Davis animation, the catchy theme song, and a queer camp charm that's both endearing and terrifying. She's the ultimate Disney villain.
This vampire bat, this inhuman beast, she ought to be locked up and never released. The world was such a wholesome